The fuzzy lines across the screen spread out like barbed wire. Lines of police in gas masks and riot helmets stood shoulder to shoulder, facing frenzied crowds. The crowds piled tires in the parking lots and set them ablaze. The headlines never stopped burning red. Downtown storefronts were smashed in as hooded figures carried out stereostats and brand new TVs. A dolled-up blonde talked on a mic towards the camera. News helicopters circled lazily overhead. Deafening booms and blinding flashes filled the night as a handful of flashbangs were thrown. A wave of white smoke wafted towards the crowd as the cops launched tear gas canisters. The reporter coughed and hacked as she tried her best to maintain her composure and keep talking to the camera. The officers marched forward with launchers and shotguns pointed low. The crowd scattered as the police continued to advance in a steady line. The broadcast swung back to the table of awkward anchors in boring suits and dresses. They smoothed out hairspray-laden scalps and shuffled their papers. Each of them cleared their throats and apologized for losing the signal. A voice grumbled close to me as she reached for the remote and turned down the volume with a scowl. "Goddamn out-of-staters." I lifted my head to let out a plume of smoke. The cigarette smoke drifted around a dollar bill stapled to the ceiling. "No Wheel of Fortune tonight, Deb?" I asked with a wiry smirk. The older woman rolled her eyes at me and fished out a fistful of pull tabs from the jar from one of the regulars. "That's what the second screen's for, smartass." She jabbed a finger towards the second CRT at the far side of the bar. A table of construction workers, still in their orange work shirts and Carhartts, idly watched as they sipped their beers and shook dice in styrofoam cups. The bartender blew a lock of her hair out of the way from her big hair that went out of fashion 10 years ago. She reached for a bottle of whiskey behind her. "You want some Windsor or that piss beer?" I let out a huff as I untied my ponytail and let my hair down to my shoulders. "Not making that mistake again. I'll stick with the beer," I said, letting out a giggle. "Suit yourself. More for me, Aaron," she said as she poured the Canadian whiskey into a plain mug and sipped it like it was her morning coffee. I rolled my eyes and looked back up at the TV. The broadcast now showed aerial footage as columns of smoke rose above the city skyline. Part of me hoped it would disappear in a week's time, but what if it didn't? "I hope this shit doesn't drag into Christmas," I half mumbled. Deb shrugged her shoulders as her faded Ozzy Osbourne shirt creased even further. They'll handle it. This ain't LA, it's Billings. It won't last." I tapped off some excess ash into the nearby ashtray and took a long drag. Let the buzz of the nicotine soothe my worries, just for a moment. "I hope you're right. I don't want to raise my son in this shitstorm." Deb finally let out a sigh and softened her voice as much as a chain smoker could. "Yeah, Sarah said she couldn't sleep with all the sirens all night." I picked through the basket of buffalo wings and nodded along. "As long as it stays there, it should be fine." Deb didn't respond. Her eyes were fixated on the broadcast. I was gonna wonder why, but then I saw what she was looking at. The footage now showed two mangled cars from a head-on collision in an intersection. Both were engulfed in flames. A fire engine hammered the wreckage with hose lines. An ambulance crew stood by a little further away, silently watching the flames shudder. The firefighters in their bunker gear stepped around two human shapes, lying on the ground, covered in sheets. The two bodies were further away than they should have been. Despite the smoke, I couldn't make out some unmoving forms still buckled in their car seats. I looked back down at the counter, tearing my eyes away from the screen. I took a long swig from the can of Coors Light. I snuffed out my cig in the dirty ashtray. "You can close the tab out for tonight," I said as I let out a sigh. The bartender nodded to me as I set out some cash and told her to stay safe. She didn't look at me when she replied. Her gaze was still fixed on that broadcast. The light from the neon Budweiser sign only made the worry in her eyes brighter. I grabbed my jacket and walked outside. The hazy streetlights washed over the parking lot. I might have called it quiet, but the shrill cry of sirens cut out any respite from the night. It hadn't stopped for weeks now. I wondered if it would just be a part of life now. I let out a sigh and climbed into my old diesel Ford. I let the glow plugs warm before cranking the key. I flicked through radio channels trying to find something normal, or at least that wasn't more goddamn news or a preacher raving about the dangers of Dungeons and Dragons. It wasn't even that late yet. Despite that, only a few stubborn dive bars and lonely gas stations stayed open after dark. The lightless buildings on the strip mall had already closed for the night. I noticed a couple of them even had metal grates pulled down over the windows. Some hadn't turned their lights on for almost a week now. It was strange. Normally they didn't close that early around here. Something about that made me grip the steering wheel a little tighter. The neighborhood was just as peaceful as ever when I pulled into my driveway. The sounds of dogs feverishly barking seemed to get louder every day. I walked inside and made sure to lock it behind me. It was just another sleepover for Alex. He and Weston had always been good friends. His parents had their shit together, so why was I worried? I put my book down on my nightstand. I slid open the drawer and stared at the old lockbox inside. I let out a soft exhale and slowly slid the drawer closed. I found myself staring out the half-curtained windows. The dull glow of the streetlights and chirping of the crickets almost drowned out the distant sirens. Almost. I let out a sigh and finally laid down and let sleep take me. The next morning it all seemed normal again. The newspaper boy tossed the morning print in driveways. The kids still shot hoops. The neighbors still mowed their lawns. I wish what I'd seen on screen had only been a dream, but the creasing headlines in the paper only confirmed my dread. I glared at the rolled newspaper before climbing into my truck and driving towards Weston's house. It was only a couple blocks away, but I doubt Alex would want to walk back home. I killed the rumbling of the diesel as I stopped at the curb. I walked past a pair of discolored flamingos that still lingered in the front yard. Alex opened the door before I even had a chance to knock with a bright smile on his face, his Spider-Man bag slung over his shoulder. A bundle of cords wrapped tightly around his Genesis. He ran out and gave me a tight hug before I could even ask him if he had fun at Weston's. His parents traded awkward small talk with me. I double-checked that Alex hadn't forgotten anything in the house. He waved goodbye to Weston, still in his pajamas. Alex chattered excitedly about all the things he got to do during the weekend. I ruffled his hair and let a smile slip through. He squeezed past the front seat and slid along the bench seats. "We gonna decorate the house soon?" he asked as he balanced the Sega on his lap. My gaze lingered past the other houses on the drive back. Even with the uncertainty, the neighborhood was still decorated for Halloween. Cardboard skeletons and Stetsons reclined in folded porch chairs. Party City cobwebs spiraled across picket fences. The sickly, neon green webs glowed faintly in the morning sun. Plastic jack-o'-lanterns hung from bare trees. Foam tombstones spiraled across front lawns. "Yeah, we'll decorate together next weekend, okay?" I reassured him. He nodded a few times as he tapped his foot. The rest of the day went by like a blur. I let Alex hog the TV, playing Earthworm Jim for the rest of the day when we got home. Normally I would nudge him over to watch the news, but I didn't really see the point. It was just more of the same at this point. I did my best to tune out the annoying sounds of the TV as I made dinner for the night. Despite Alex seeming to be in a good mood, I couldn't help but notice he was quieter than usual as we sat across from each other at the dinner table. He didn't once complain about the Brussels sprouts or how he didn't have enough ketchup to drown his meatloaf with. I let him stay up a little longer than usual before I sent him to bed for the night. My alarm blared in the morning and I got Alex ready for school. I walked him to the corner where the bus picked him up. Normally I wouldn't wait alongside him for the bus. This time I didn't rush off to work. Instead, I endured the cold air and sipped my lukewarm coffee. I went back to change into my scrubs and freshen up as best I could. I sped off to work wrapped up in a warm flannel. I shuffled out of my truck and my steel-toe boots, still clutching my thermos. The noisy rail yard was the same as usual. Same contractors hiding away in makeshift smoking areas. Same dispatchers barking on radios. Same rickety trailer building you could barely call a clinic. Most of the day I spent filling out reports and taping out broken fingers, flushing out eyes and yelling at track crews to drink more water. One of the other nurses tapped me on the shoulder as I was filling my thermos back up from the burnt coffee pot. "Hey, someone from your kid's school is on the line." I let out a sigh as I sealed up my coffee. I hoped Alex hadn't ended up in the principal's office again. "Right, I'll grab it in a second." I stomped over to the wall phone, cradled the receiver into my shoulder. "Hello?"
Hi, is this Alex's mom?
I heard a younger woman's voice ask. "It is."
This is Susan calling from Meadowlark Elementary. The students were released early today.
Was there a holiday today I didn't remember?
No, it's only as a precaution for the next couple weeks.
I raised an eyebrow, chewing on my lip and thought, "They're not going to be in school?" The line was silent for a few moments before I could hear her clear her throat through the static.
It's only temporary, but no, not at this time.
Alright, I'm at work, but I'll be there as soon as I can.
Don't worry, he's gonna be at the after-school program in the auditorium until then.
Alright, thanks. Bye now, I said before finally hanging up the phone. I didn't even know who was going to watch him at home. Despite that, my boss understood and let me leave early. I changed out my scrubs and climbed into my truck and just sat there. I punched in the cigarette lighter on the dash and stared out across the sky. The sun hung midway in the hazy air. Distant columns of black and white smoke spilled across the skyline. When the lighter clicked, I yanked out the hot coil and pressed the orange glow to my cigarette and breathed it all in. The school was all wrong when I got there. There were no kids standing outside waiting to be picked up. A billing squad car was parked just outside the admin building. A gas mask bag rested on the dash as the officer packed his lip. Every now and again he would spit into a Hardee's cup while he did paperwork. I expected a chaotic line of cars filled with worried parents, but there wasn't. I snuffed out my cigarette in the ashtray and cranked down the window. The cold air washed over my face as I hung up a new air freshener before stepping out of my truck. The mouth of the auditorium opened wide as I swung past the heavy doors. The ugly blued speckled carpet muffled my boots as I walked to the folding table in front of me. A girl barely out of high school sat behind the table. She listened to a Walkman and pretended not to notice me. Hi, I'm here to..." The girl let out a sigh and pushed her headphones down to her neck and wrinkled her nose. "Name?" "Aaron, here for Alex." She slid over a clipboard without offering a pen. "Sign here," she said without looking up at me as she flipped through a magazine. I pursed my lips and reached over for a pen and scribbled a signature. "Over there." She bobbed her head towards the empty stage. "Right, thanks." The high schooler didn't respond and slipped back on her headphones. I let out a huff and walked past her, doing my best not to trip on the line of school bags or bump into any of the screaming kids playing tag. A group of kids huddled around a CRT on a pushcart. A Nintendo was plugged in haphazardly with wires threatening to spill out from the cart. Rainbow Road spiraled across the screen. Two boys sat cross-legged with controllers in hand as they stared up at the course. Alex was among the gathering. I tapped him on the shoulder and told him it was time to go. He said bye to his friends and grabbed his bag, following me outside. I thought of asking him about what happened today, what they said, anything really. A repeating sound tore me out of my focus. Thump, 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 thump. It didn't stop. It only grew louder and louder. I looked up. Its body was too wide, too large to be a police helicopter. The rotor blades sounded different as they cut through the air, heavier with a distinct thump unlike the steady buzzing I'd gotten used to hearing. The olive-drab shape flew lower than I expected. Its shadow swallowed the painted kickball walls and swing sets. It said in blocky letters, United States Army, along the tail. The patchy autumn trees shuddered. The Huey's turbine shrieked as it finally passed over our heads. My chest tightened when the vibrations from the helicopter coiled around my ribs. Alex didn't stop staring at the sky as the chopper shrunk with every passing moment. I gently guided him forward so he didn't trip on the curb. The sound of spinning blades faded over the horizon. Did they say why? I finally asked him. Alex turned to me, confused. Why we're out early? I nodded. He only shrugged his shoulders. Miss Brooks didn't say why, but it's only for a few weeks. I didn't say anything as I set down the seat for him to climb inside the truck. He rummaged into the school bag as I started up the Ford. He handed me something from over the seats. I squinted at it as the engine settled. It was a birthday invite card you might see at a drugstore shelf. Superheroes plastered on the sparky lettering that said you're invited. Gavin's already 10? Christ. I remember when you boys would go on summer trips up the glacier. Alex furrowed his brow before memory flickered in his eyes. I remember. Dad took us fishing on the lake. I was too much of a baby to reel in the fish myself. A somber smile crossed my face and I pinched Alex's cheek. You were a little kid then, hon. Now you're all grown up. Alex nodded a few times and stared at his shoes. I ruffled his hair and gave him my best warm smile. When things get better, we can always go fishing together, okay? First, let's stop at the store. Alex let out a displeased huff and rolled his head back. Didn't we just get groceries yesterday? We're not going to the grocery store, Mr. Tood. We're going to Big R's. I snarked back as I started to drive off. Despite Alex's grievances, I squeezed the heavy diesel into a parking spot clearly meant for a sedan. We passed by the row of John Deeres. The jack-o'-lanterns glared at us from their perch on the hay bales in front of the store. The crimson R towered over everything. I pushed the cart along, dodging other shoppers with wide eyes and stuffed baskets. They moved differently than the usual after-work rush. No, I could see it in the way they yanked their clueless kids along each aisle. The way they pecked at every item on the shelf like a magpie. The way they clutched their carts till their knuckles turned snow white. I picked what I needed, deadbolts for the doors, latches for the windows, a propane camping stove, gas cans when the power goes out, bottle of seafoam that coax a stubborn generator on a cold morning, a few logs of summer sausage and blocks of sharp cheddar when the fridge goes empty, a jug or two of Rotello when my dad's old truck keeps burning through oil, fuel stabilizer so the gas for the generator doesn't go stale, bottle of Howes so the diesel doesn't gel up in the cold. I smiled at Alex as he kept turning to stare at the cart with every new thing I added. Are we going camping? He asked me. I didn't answer. Mom? I couldn't even look at him. I only smiled. Why don't you go look at the chicks for a minute? I'll be right back. I gestured to the metal tub with chirping chicks under heat lamps across the way. He only bobbed his head once before he walked off. I turned a corner and walked up to the gun counter. A middle-aged man in a polo shirt with a thinning hairline stood behind the glass case. A vaguely disinterested glint flashed in his eyes as he looked up at me. Can I help you, ma'am? He asked, adjusting the buck knife on his belt. Just here to pick up some ammo. Ain't everyone, he half mumbled as he clicked a pen and squinted at a clipboard. I'm sorry? We're out of 38 special, 9mm, 308, and 40 Smith & Wesson already. What will it be? He said it like he had stated it for the 10th time today already. 2 boxes of 45 auto, silver tips if he got them. He set the 2 boxes on the counter wordlessly and stared at me expectantly. And 3 boxes of 12 gauge buck. Double up? I nodded and he thunked the ammo on the counter. Anything else? He asked while clearing his throat, scribbling something on the clipboard. You have any 223 left? Varmint or saw points? I'll take either. He gave me a brisk nod as he kneeled down and dug around the shelves with a grumble. He finally set out a single box of varmint rounds with a thud. All we got left, miss. Sorry. I waved a hand as I reached into my purse and started to count out the cash. He stuffed the ammo into a plastic bag. I carefully placed it into my cart before tying it closed completely from prying eyes. Alex was pacing in between the rabbits and the ducklings when I went to get him. His eyes drifted to the covered bag in the cart, but he made no comment. Come on, let's go check out. Lines at the front coiled like a serpent. People waited with long stares, full carts and tapping feet. It seemed to last forever, but it might have lasted only 10 minutes. Even when the cashier barely looked at us as she hurried us along, it didn't seem to stop. I felt my son's gaze burrow into the back of my skull the entire drive back to the house. I set my things away when we got back, wandered into the kitchen and picked up the phone. I still need someone to watch Alex while I was at work. I finally gave up when the third sitter I called told me she had already been booked up. I finally gave in and called up my boss.
Hello?
Hey, it's Aaron. I need a favor.
Alright, what is it?
He asked as he cleared his throat. Is it alright if I bring my son to work with me? I won't let him wander around, but it's like pulling teeth to get someone to watch him right now. I heard an exhale over the line.
His dad can't watch him?
No. The man on the other line paused before he responded.
He's out of town?
He passed away a couple years ago. I tightened my grip on the cord.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't be.
Look, you can bring him in, just, don't let him wander around the site, alright?
Thanks a lot, Aaron. We said our goodbyes and I finally let out a sigh of relief. I pressed my body to the counter, a newfound weight bearing down on my frame. Just how long was this gonna last? I didn't have the answers and I doubted I would find any soon. If David was still here, he would have known what to do. The driest wisecrack to bring a smile to my face. Instead, I opened the cabinet, let a glass of Old Forester keep me company just for tonight.